In this presentation, we will use tax software to consider moving expenses for armed forces. We'll be using Lacerte tax software by Intuit, the owner of QuickBooks. Other tax software will be similar in terms of a data input process, and then we'll take a look at the tax forms with the tax software. With regards to the income tax equation, we're going to be down here on the deductions or adjustments to income, the above the line or Schedule 1 deductions. Those will be the ones we are considering. Here we are on our 1040. We have our mock client of James Smith, single individual. We have down here the $100,000 in the W-2 income. Now we're going to be considering the above the line deductions or the Schedule 1 deductions. That's going to be in 8A. Now if you're doing the data input for yourself or for a client, this is way more restrictive than it used to be. This moving expense used to be related to a change of job that was so far away from your home or whatnot. Now it's only related to the military. So if you're talking to someone about it, you got to say, well, first, are they in the military? Then you might think, oh, okay, they might have a moving expense. Did they move recently? Then you say, all right, then you might have a moving expense that qualifies because you're in the military and you moved recently. And then you got to think, well, did you get reimbursed for the move by the military, which is often the case. And if that happened, then it should be reflected in the income that's going to be reported by the military in a similar way as a W-2 employee would report the 401k or something. So then in that case, that would be fairly straightforward. We wouldn't have to deal with the moving expense here. If that's not the case, if there was a move that wasn't reimbursed for what was specifically related to the military, then we can go in and say, okay, what's the cost of the move? Can we get those deductions? We're not going to have any documentation for them. We're going to have to basically put them together and see if we can get those deductions up here on line 8A. If that is the case, note, we're not talking about itemized deductions. So we want to be able to put those together because we don't have the restriction that we would have down here with the itemized deductions. These deductions up here, if they're qualified for, will give us a benefit without basically the phase out of itemized deductions or the standard deductions. So in that case, then it's worthwhile typically to be adding up those expenses and putting them in this location, but it's much more restricted than it used to be. So here it is on line 8A. Then we're going to say that that's going to be supported by the Schedule 1. So here's the Schedule 1. We're on Part 2 of the Schedule 1 for the adjustments, and we're looking for line 13, moving expenses for members of the armed forces. So then I'm going to jump to the input location here using Lacerte by right-clicking. I want to jump to the location to put that information in. We have a form 3903. I'm going to go ahead and add that moving expenses. So that's what we want. We want the moving expenses here. So then we have the categorization of the moving expenses. I'll let you go through here and consider the types of expenses that would be qualified at the moving expenses. You can get into more detail on that if you want to look up the details on irs.gov website related to moving expenses. I'm just going to add the lodging here. We'll put our $1,000 here. So there's our trusty $1,000, and we're going to go back up to the forms and see what that will do in terms of the population. You see it populating here on line 13. There it is on line 13. Adding up down here on line 22, it should then go forward to the 1040. So if we go then to the 1040, scroll down, there's our 100,000. Now we've got those kind of above the line or Schedule 1, 1,000, which will reduce the adjusted gross income to the 99,000. We still have the standard deduction, so we get this deduction if we qualify for it, even if we're taking the standard deduction, unlike the itemized deductions. So if we qualify for it, worth putting together typically. And then that will bring us down to the 86,800.